Joshua, how are we, sir?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me on.
Welcome to the podcast. I know we have a few mutual friends and stuff like that. I know people, you've an amazing book coming out in the next little while. You can eat that. So, for anyone that isn't aware of your work or the further reason of the book, which is a quite an emotional reason, can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself and the book that's coming out?
Yeah, cool. I'm a nutritionist. I got a master's in nutrition, qualified probably like 7, 8 years ago now. And a kind of brief background is got into nutrition when I was young. Mainly through growing up around my mum's eating disorder. So she has anorexia. She's currently going through treatment at the moment. And it's all looking very positive, but she's had that since a teenager, so it's kind of been my whole life. So growing up around that, obviously like kind of shaped how I viewed things, food wise. And she was great. She always kind of encouraged me to be interested in nutrition. And originally it came from like a sports perspective, like from a personal reason. So growing up playing football, rugby, that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, I did food tech at school, did it at A levels, and then yeah, I went off and did like a degree in sports first because I wanted to work in sports and long-term view of working in nutrition, and then kind of just realized there's a whole different side of nutrition. So I think a lot of people think of it from just fat loss and from a sports perspective, but so many people struggle with food every day, and that was very much highlighted by my mum's eating disorder. And I was like, cool, I want to really go down the avenue of helping people kind of reconnect with food and no longer be fearful and scared of it. So yeah, I want to finish that. I worked in mental health services. So I worked in a place called Broadmoor, which is a like grade A maximum security psychiatric hospital, which was pretty interesting. I worked with all sorts there from um, you know, literally all sorts from cannibals through to like terrorists, all sorts. Um, so yeah, that was pretty eye-opening, but some really severe like mental health disorders from like psychosis, schizophrenia, and there was eating disorders there as well. So my main role there was trying to get people to eat a bit better, help manage maybe their weight on new medications, and get them in the gym and stuff. I worked in public health. I've worked in sport, and then maybe like 5, 6 years ago, set up my own business working one to one with people. Since then, opened the academy, done various programs on like emotional eating, binge eating, that kind of stuff, and yeah, just waiting for the book to come out now. So that's a bit of a background on everything.
Jeez, that's some cannibals. That was the thing that
Mm.
perked my ears up. So with the nutrition side of things, do you feel the nutrition space is in a good space at the minute, or do you feel it's in the pits?
I A bit of both. So I think for it's always going to be a strange place because at the end of the day, like fear sells, and people like to believe that they have this special answer, and I guess there's a like with anything, there's a drive for making money, and that people will do anything to make money. But I would say I've seen a bit of a shift over maybe like the last 6, 12 months with maybe more nutritionists and you know personal trainers and stuff starting to realize the importance of like people's relationship with food. And I think one thing that actually brought a lot of people together was the whole debate around ultra processed food, where a lot of
Mm.
people were pushing that it's all bad and we shouldn't be feeding kids this, and people are lazy and they've got no willpower and need the governments to basically like ban ultra processed foods or put warning labels on them. And I think a lot of nutritionists and personal trainers actually came together and kind of realized actually this isn't the big issue here. And actually we should be a bit more compassionate, empathetic towards people and help them with the more important things. So I think it's actually a bit better. Not that there's less misinformation, but there's actually more people fighting back and giving out like sound, you know, real life advice, I guess. So a bit of both. And that's better in my opinion than it was maybe a year ago, where it felt like I was kind of like, I wouldn't say on my own. I'd say there was just a small portion of our industry that were kind of relaying the same message, whereas I feel like that's grown and there's a bit more of a like community with people supporting each other a bit more and fighting back. So better, I would say, hopefully.
hopefully, and I think when the whole thing kind of came out about the protein bar and the kind of the fear around that, there was a lot of it's a fine line between trying to get a point across versus not attacking the individual,
Yeah.
and I think that may have crossed over a little bit. But like the information that's out there, there are definitely people who are putting out proper information, but it sometimes feels like you're shedding into an abyss in
Yeah.
that there's like I can see why so many people are overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's out there, how they can decipher. Because even if you're reading a study yourself, you're and you may know what it's saying or struggle to read it. You can only imagine someone else that may not have the skill set to do that through no fault of their own, of how to actually is this fact, is this fiction, or whatever it is. But do you think that and that also ties in with kind of like the whole like diet culture thing. And a lot of people would have grown up in the era of nothing tastes as good as skinny feels and all that kind of stuff. How much damage do you actually think like the likes of diet culture has done to people's relationship with food? Because the relationship with food is the bit that it's the foundation, but it's the bit that is not as sexy as the progress pictures or the
Mm.
weight going down as people can be attached to. They like just fix me and get me my weight down. How much damage do you think that actual diet culture thing has done for people?
I think it's done loads because I think it's everywhere, and I think people don't realize quite what diet culture is, and they often celebrate it, thinking it's like a healthy thing. So it might be, skipping meals because you're going out for a dinner. It might be, you know, exercising so that you can have a takeaway later. It might be, going out with friends and having a few drinks and a meal out, and then getting up and exercising the next morning to kind of like burn it off. It's kind of those things that I think people don't really think about. Judging themselves by the number on the scale, or feeling like they're more worthy, or they'll be more respected, or whatever if they're in a smaller body. And I think it's kind of everywhere. And I think you'll see it even if you go take a walk through somewhere like London or Dublin, you'll see it everywhere, like advertisements, that even just like on TV, just yeah, just it's everywhere. But I think it's kind of like it's all around us that we kind of don't notice it anymore. But yeah, like social media is obviously rife with it. But I think just the average person doesn't quite understand the amount of maybe thoughts they have each day that are driven by diet culture, and they just assume they're normal and that's what they need to
Are you worried about the next generation?
do. Yeah, always. And I think definitely growing up in a household that obviously had an eating disorder present like my whole life, I've seen it, so I know how small little things can be, how small things can drive it and fuel it. And I speak to parents who are worried about their children. I get messages every week from parents who are worried about their children, about things they've had said to them at school, things they've had said to them, at sports clubs. And I think there's always going to be an element of it's always going to be there because it'll be passed on through generations, because the older generation will have grown up in their era of diet culture, and they just see that as normal. And it's not that they're trying to like push it on anyone. It's just that's what they were told. That's what they were taught. That's what they've believed in. So, you can argue they're probably just trying to do their best and look after us. So they will push their beliefs on us. And the younger generation, social media is the biggest worry. And to give you a bit of an insight and things people may not realize, the kind of the thing that made I always knew it was an issue, and then I was invited to Parliament last year to sit with MPs and Ofcom, who basically like police like media and TV and stuff in the UK. I was there, and like BBC were there, ITV, really, big people in kind of like social media and media and those kind of things. And we were talking to MPs and trying to highlight the dangers of like nutrition misinformation on social media, and how it was increasing the number of eating disorders, particularly aiming them at children. And there was a couple of researchers there who had essentially done some research into what social media actually is like for children. So they set up social media profiles pretending to be 13-year-old girls. And they joined the platform, like no picture, but it just basically they put the date of birth, put that they were female, joined the platforms. They didn't like any posts. They literally just scrolled through the posts, and within like 30 minutes on, I can't remember how many platforms, but definitely on some platforms they were showing pro eating disorder content within 30 minutes of being on the platforms. Bear in mind, the algorithm knew nothing about them other than they were a 13-year-old girl. So that highlights, doesn't matter whether you search for it or don't search for it, even if you are a 13-year-old girl, you will be shown pro eating disorder content on social media platforms. And I think TikTok is a huge issue, and the problem with things like TikTok is they have to like adhere to rules, and if they don't adhere to the rules, then they get fined. Now they just have to prove that they are adhering to the rules, but platforms like that, they don't actually submit the proof, so they just pay the fine, and the fine is like a few £1 million, which to them is nothing compared to what they make. So there's no real policing of social media, and when I can't name who they are, but when I sat in the room, I basically put the point across that, like, at the end of the day, we can control what is shown. Like, we can at least police it or do something about it. It's not a case of we're just at the mercy of these platforms. And I was told in that room in front of MPs, everyone, that they believe that people have the capacity and capability to decide whether they want to agree with something and follow it, and that includes children. And then at that point, like they essentially lost the whole room. But it just shows you're never going to win that battle, I don't think. So yeah, I am worried mainly through social media. I think that's the biggest one, because any child could set up a profile, and yeah, like that, within 30 minutes they are showing stuff, and eating disorders and things like that are on the rise in young children. So yeah, I think that's a battle we're gonna struggle to try and combat personally, which worries me. Yeah.
That is that's frightening because like I what I'm very conscious of, like I'm a big sports fan,
Mm.
and the one thing that I've definitely noticed a lot more coming up on my feed anyway is more like the gambling ads, like the different
Yeah, yeah.
bookmakers. I don't gamble at all, but because I like a certain team or I
Mm.
like certain content, I'm getting bombarded with those. So you can, and they're like even on their ads, they're kind of like gambling aware. Don't do the X,
Yeah.
Y, or Z. That's they don't care about the gambling aware thing. They're kind of like, no, we want your bottom line. So it's very similar in that they're still bombarding you with someone. Someone doesn't
Yeah.
have the capacity to who is maybe struggling or has a gambling addiction to decipher of I can't put this bet on now. Like if you
Mm.
listen to like the likes of Paul Merson and stuff, it's not
Yeah, yeah.
it's not a decision that he's making. It's a different thing. It's a deeper rooted thing. So to be able to say that the person's at almost fault
Yeah.
for, but that 30 minutes
It's
is
crazy.
it's mental.
Yeah.
That's madness. Um, one of the other things that kind of comes in for people is that around that food guilt. I think food guilt is a big term.
Mm.
I know we're going to talk about another one, which is around the food freedom side of things, that a lot of people kind of have heard, but they may misconstrue it, or it might be bandaged around a little bit more than it maybe needs to. What is food guilt essentially, and why? I know diet culture has an element of it already, but why are so many people suffering with the food guilt around there when they kind of go out for a meal or have an ice cream with their kids, for example?
Yeah, sure. I think because we've been taught to moralize food essentially, so we've been taught that there are foods that are good for us, foods that are bad for us, and while there are foods that are maybe more nutritious and foods that are less nutritious, we often forget that there's so much more to food than just the energy in it and the nutrients in it. Um, and food is connection, it's celebration, it's culture. You've only got to go all over the world. It'd be like, imagine going somewhere like Paris and not getting pastry, or visiting somewhere like India and not getting a curry, or just it just wouldn't make sense, would it? So that's what food is. It's also like connection and culture. Um, and that's why. people love food, because it's not just the taste of food, it's what you do with food. And you might have, certain foods or meals or certain dessert that you might eat with your parents that maybe you don't eat on your own, because it's actually not about the food, it's about that connection with your parents or grandparents or your children or best friend. And we all have that. And I guess that's one thing I kind of learned, was that's one thing I missed out on growing up. It wasn't that my mum didn't let us have food, it's that she didn't join us. So, she didn't eat dinner with us. I didn't have an ice cream with my mum until I was 28. Never had an ice cream on holiday as a kid, teenager with my mum. So, because the guilt of having that food was too big for her, that she just couldn't stomach it, because it would just ruin her whole week, and she wouldn't be present, because all she would be all consumed by guilt and regret and shame, because she'd been taught growing up that she couldn't have too many, or maybe she was told that she needed to lose some weight and that she shouldn't be having an ice cream. So a lot of feelings like that can come from one thing they've heard growing up or just in life, and then they can just latch onto that thing and feel like, I can only have that if I earn it, or I've already eaten enough today, I'm not hungry, can't have the ice cream, or I've already had an ice cream this week, or I had some chocolate earlier, so I can't have an ice cream today, because we've been told that we can only have limited amounts of these foods, and that if we have them, we'll put on weight, or we won't be as healthy. And I think that goes back to kind of messaging everywhere, um, and people judging people. You've only got to look at social media again. People are so judgmental that you see somebody, anyone online, and they're saying, like, people who are overweight shouldn't be having a McDonald's, they shouldn't be having ice cream, they should be literally cutting this stuff out until they lose the weight, and then only when you've lost the weight, then you can add those things in. And it's kind of like the whole language and mindset around food is very warped, that we forget the importance of enjoyment. Like, people are allowed to enjoy food. And actually, if you've got a way of eating that you enjoy and that ticks the boxes in terms of nutrition and things like that, why can't you have a bit of what you enjoy in there? You don't have to earn anything. But yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to, yeah, moralizing moralizing food choices, and what we've been taught, essentially.
In your own terms, in your own language, what is a healthy relationship with food look like?
It's a food that doesn't cause you fear. It's a way of eating that feels calm. So you're not second guessing everything. You don't, if like I said, if you go and have an ice cream, you're not sat there debating, what you should do the rest of the day, whether you should have dinner, whether you should have had the ice cream or not. We should just have the ice cream, go, that was really nice, and then move on with your day. It shouldn't be something that is just constantly on your mind, taking up. Food shouldn't take up much brain space. Of course, you should. Like, I was thinking this morning, I was like, have I got food in the fridge for dinner tonight? That's a normal thing to think about, right? I was
Yeah,
like, have I got anything? Do I need to go and get something, today? That's normal. But I shouldn't be thinking like, oh my goodness, there's crisps in the cupboard, and should I eat them all today and then get rid of them so they're not there tomorrow? Those kind of thoughts, that we should feel calm that there's something in the cupboards that may be less nutritious. So it's just, people can just experience that food noise all day long, whereas we want people to feel calm. Like, I'll call this crisps in the cupboard. Do you know, if I fancy a bag later or with my lunch, I'll have a bag of crisps, and it be like that, and then it ends. And then you
yeah.
get to lunchtime and you go, cool, I'll have my eggs on toast. Do I fancy a bag of crisps? Yeah, I'll have a bag of crisps. Or actually, maybe I'll have them tonight after dinner when I'm watching something. I'll enjoy them then. Or actually, do you know what? I don't really fancy them today, but I know I can have them tomorrow, so it's fine. I'll just leave them there. That's the kind of stuff I would say we should be aiming to move towards, and that would be, a healthy, calm, relationship around food.
What's your stance in relation to the element of the weight loss drugs? Because I think an awful lot of people they 1000% have a kind of a place, but I think a lot of the fear mongering that kind of goes with them is now kind of going the other way. So when people are out with friends, it's almost like the top of the discussion. Oh, they're on it, she's on it, he's on it. And it can kind of take away from what the person's trying to do,
Yeah.
but also can put a pressure on the person to go and take them for themselves. what's your kind of stance of on the weight loss drugs as a whole, and when is the kind of like the need for them for an individual?
So first of all, I think they're amazing, but you have to view them as medication. And I think that's where people go wrong. So they're no different to something like a statin or an antidepressant or anything like that. But and you have to put them in that category. So, someone like myself, I was diagnosed with depression as a child. I took antidepressants for 14 years. Without them, there is no way I would have been a nutritionist because I wouldn't have got through university and stuff. But they're not for everyone. And it's not a case of, my mood's been a bit low for a week. I'll go and buy some antidepressants and just take them for a few weeks and hopefully they pick me up a bit. But that's what people do with weight loss drugs. And I think that's what we've got to remember is they are a medication first. So for the right person in the right scenario with the right help and support whilst taking them, like they're life changing. But they need to be viewed as something that's lifelong. You don't, with the potential maybe of coming off them like years down the line. But that's why we have to view them the same as like statins, antidepressants, blood pressure medication. They are medication. They're not just something that we take, for a few weeks, a few months. Whereas I think a lot of people are just seeing them like a supplement or like something they just take short term to kind of lose a bit of weight and then kind of been led to believe it's fine. I just need to lose this weight and then it'll be fine because then I'll keep doing the exercise and I'll keep eating the same. But people forget that they are just an appetite suppressant. So, as soon as you're off them, your appetite will increase, and the research and data shows us that. But there's far too much fear mongering about them, but then they're far too easy to get hold of, and there's far too much advertising that's targeting the wrong population. My opinion should be you should only be able to get them if you go see your GP and you are signed off as safe and in need of using them. It shouldn't be something. And I kind of ran this mini experiment a couple of years ago. I don't know how long it was. I was just like, my BMI is obese, so I just applied to get them, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll send them to you." Like I
Yeah,
passed the online
it's that
check.
easy.
It's
It's
so
that easy.
easy, and I was just like, "This is a huge issue," because I needed to kind of see how easy it was. So I just did that. I literally just put in my BMI, like, and it was fine. They were like, "You've been accepted for them," and I was like, "That's crazy." So,
But there was a series here on in Ireland with one of the TV presenters, and she used to run one of the TV shows called almost like it was like the equivalent of The Biggest Loser, the one over
mm,
in the States, and that got kicked off television. But she did a documentary series on the weight loss drugs, and on that series, she just went online, and she would nowhere near be classified as someone
yeah,
who would necessarily need them, and took a picture of her toes or whatever it was with the weighing scales, or it could be anyone's toes, to be honest with you, and went on and got them. And that's how easy they are. But in the UK, it seems a little bit. It's in Ireland, it's easy. But I've had clients who were on in Ireland, but used to use the UK system because there was less barriers to entry in order to get them. All they had to do was send a picture of toes on a weighing scales
yeah,
in order to get them, and they would be at the stage where it's probably going a little bit far the other way, where they may not need them anymore, and it's kind of trying to work through the behaviors, the habits, the disordered eating pattern kind of side of things, if that makes sense. So it is quite scary that someone could just lie about their age,
yeah,
go on and get them, and like with the BMI side of things, like it's not the greatest metric in the world. Like it's you could be over that tipping point even slightly,
yeah,
be like Tyke Furlong playing
yeah,
rugby, being able to barrel into people and still be fit and healthy. But you'd be on that scale of like, or Will Skelton, who's just
yeah, yeah.
different animal altogether. So it's kind of like it is a bit scary that we're still at that place of there's 1,000% of place that they're needed, but it just feels like as a society we kind of abuse the system and abuse things a little bit more, but the system maybe isn't created to cater for that need or to kind of nullify that need or to kind of manage it a little bit more. Maybe it's because it's so new, it's just not ready for it yet.
Yeah, and I really empathize with people because I know even just yesterday I was chatting to one of my clients who was at a barbecue at the weekend and people were on them and one of them just said, "Oh, I'm not taking them anymore, but I've got, one spare. Do you want to try it?" And she was like, "I'm really tempted." And I was like, "Really understand that." but I don't think it's for you. And I think that that's what people actually need. They need to have a discussion with somebody who knows them, who's worked with them, who understands what they've tried and what their issues are, because unfortunately, they're not going to fix a lot of people's issues. They are going to reduce your appetite. They are not going to help you, go and move a bit more. They are not going to help you develop a routine of exercise. They're not going to help you, eat more fruits and vegetables or eat more protein. They're actually going to make that harder. So I think people, yeah, just need to understand that this is something that is for the right person, amazing, but it's not something that can be viewed as something to use short term, because it will actually make things harder. Like we've even got research now showing that it doesn't help with emotional eating. So if you're
Yeah.
somebody that finds yourself comfort eating in the evenings because of loneliness or low mood or stress, it's not going to reduce that, because it's not going to like calm that feeling. Um, and then as soon as you come off them, you have no coping mechanisms for those emotions. So it's a very complex topic, and like I said, I'm fully supportive of them. But I think we've made it a lot more complicated for people with how easy they are to get and how much they are advertised and how much they are talked about. Whereas people don't talk about statins that much, but because it's something that directly helps with weight loss, you know, and again, it goes back to that, the diet culture side of it. That is something that fuels it massively.
And it's like with the gastric band and stuff like that. When a lot of people go on the gastric band, a lot of people can get depression
Mm.
afterwards because they've lost their coping mechanism in a way,
Yeah,
and they may suffer with emotional dysregulation, really poor body image, etc. And a lot of people can suffer with depression, and it can. They're starting to see, obviously, as there's more studies kind of happening, that the similar enough patterns are reappearing for those with the weight loss drugs.
absolutely. We have someone who's in our one-to-one coaching system, and she was originally in the academy. She was doing amazing, absolutely amazing. And then she started taking the weight loss drugs, and it made everything really, really hard because she lost all enjoyment from her food. And she used to enjoy like her bag of crisps or a little bar of chocolate in the evening every night, a glass of wine at the weekend. She lost all enjoyment from food, that she then came off them, and now she really struggles with binge eating, and she's like, now I need one-to-one help, because I need to get back to now stopping the binge eating and enjoying my food. She never used to binge eat in the first place. So yeah, it's just, it's not as easy or simple as it sounds. And I think, yeah, I wish people had the ability to maybe just go and speak to somebody in depth that knows them, or at least their GP first. And I would encourage people to do that, or even just a nutritionist or a coach or somebody that you know personally, and just say, look, with what you know about me, I'm thinking about this. Honestly, what's your opinion? And I think sometimes people need to hear that, because the pressures of just losing weight and taking something to help lose that weight seems so appealing. And if you go back 10, 15 years, especially when I was a teenager, fat burners were the rage. And I
Yeah,
was buying fat burners as a child. Like, if Ozempic was around then, I probably would have bought Ozempic. I
yeah,
was lean as anything. I used to play, I was playing football at a decent level. I just wanted to lose a little bit of fat for summer. I really didn't need to. I was not overweight or anything at all. Yet I was still buying fat burners. And that's what scares me, is if you put that 16, 17-year-old in today's society with what they can access, I probably would have tried to get hold of Ozempic or Mounjaro. That's scary.
yeah. Because history does repeat itself.
Mm,
The next one is the element of ultra processed foods or
yeah.
UPFs. And we live in a wonderful world where people now go into shopping centers and have a camera and make a reel out of it, or dance in front of an aisle and point at food, and the game's gone. Um, it, I think the first thing is, with ultra processed food, like, is there one definition for it? I know this answer before.
Mm.
And how can people challenge that narrative around it in relation to what's going to make them feel nourished versus that out of control feeling around them? And I think that's a very broad question, but also a very broad line for people, because the gray area is where most people need to go. So, what is your take on ultra processed foods, and how can people kind of break through the narrative of like what they need, what they may not be um, needed for them?
Yeah, I think with ultra processed foods, kind of like you said, there's two issues. One is how they're classified, and two is the kind of like fear-driven content behind it. And so the massive issue is with how they are classified. So essentially, you have chocolate in the same category as baked beans and wholemeal supermarket bread. So they are all classified as ultra processed food. So the first thing we need to do is get a new definition and new categories for these foods. The Nova system that we use to classify them was never actually meant to be used to classify them in line with like health and the nutrition of foods. It was literally just to classify them in terms of, how they're made and things. But we've kind of used that classification. It's very similar to BMI. BMI was never used to determine someone's health, but we still use that, and it's what, a couple of 100 years old or something like that.
Mhm.
So we have the same issue with the classification as we do with BMI. So that's the first thing to kind of understand. And I'm sure if I said to people, if you were to eat, you know, beans on toast, a few times a week, do you feel like that would make your diet any less nutritious? I think most people would say, no, it's pretty good. Like I ate it growing up, or because, as a nutritionist, I eat beans on toast a few times a week. It's a
Yeah, the
quick,
class.
easy lunch. Like it ticks boxes.
Yeah,
So the way we are now talking about ultra processed foods makes people think that that is a bad thing to eat, and that is going to increase their rate of cancer or cardiovascular disease and things like that, because they've been told that ultra processed foods makes us more overweight, increases our risk of developing cancer and type 2 diabetes and stuff like that. So then you got to remember the average person has a very, they don't understand like the nuances of like nutrition science, and they're not required to. Just like I don't understand how to fix my car if something goes wrong with the engine. I'll give it a go, but I don't understand it. But the issue I think with food is because everyone eats and everyone needs to eat. Most people have an opinion on food, and people like to
yeah.
share their opinion like they're entitled to. But I think there's a difference between sharing your opinion and using that opinion to drive content and engagement and sales through fear, because we know that the louder something is, the more it kind of sells or the more engagement it gets. So yeah, there is a big issue with ultra processed foods, and like you said, there is this grey area where I eat ultra processed foods every day, every week. If I was to remove them, maybe I wouldn't eat as well because I wouldn't maybe put the time and effort into making something else. Um, if you went through like mine in your cupboards, you'll find many ultra processed foods that we just use as like convenient staples every week, that help us. And that might be a sauce that you put into something like a bolognese or into a stir fry, because
Mm.
actually the meal was really nutritious with the protein and the veg and the fiber and stuff. And the sauce just makes it taste a bit nicer. So you want to eat it instead of spending ages roasting your own vegetables and then blending it up to make a sauce. I don't even have kids and I don't even have the time or the drive to do that. So I can't imagine what like a single mum of three who works two jobs, there's no way she's going to want to do that. So I think we just have to apply a lot of nuance to it, which is really hard when we know that like, fear-driven content, you know, outperforms, the I always use the it depends content, because if I take what I say every day as a nutritionist, I say it depends on this, right? Because
Yeah.
it does. It's
It
not,
wrecks people's heads though.
yeah, it's not a sexy answer. And if my content on social media was it depends, it depends, it depends, no one would care because they just want black and white answers.
Yeah.
They want it's right or it's wrong, it's fact or it's fiction. I should do that, I shouldn't do that. That's what people want. Whereas, you'll know, it's like if it was that simple, then every single one of your clients would have the same exercise program.
Mm.
Whereas actually everyone's needs are different. So we forget that when it comes to things like ultra processed foods. And like I said, a lot of it goes back to this issue with how they're classified. Um, and simplest way of putting it is, yeah, if you've got chocolate and sweets and pot noodles, and biscuits in the same category as wholemeal supermarket bread and baked beans and a tomato and basil like bolognese sauce, then we have an issue, don't we?
How do we change that?
From the people at the top, they need to change that. We can't change that. So they need to change that
I
from.
haven't changed BMI for a couple of 100 years. And I don't see this changing anytime soon.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. We have, and that's actually a really good point because we have the knowledge and the understanding of other tests that will tell us someone's health better,
Yeah.
right? For example, like waist to shoulder ratio, waist to height ratio, things like that, right? Body fat percentage, all those kind of things, health markers, blood markers, those kind of things. But they take a lot of time. All right. And they would also take a lot of resources and funding and training to change how the NHS or um, the, what's your system here called? HSE. It would take a lot of training to change the staff, and
Systems.
change how they would use those methods. So they don't do it. And it's exactly the same with the whole debate around ultra processed foods. It would take a lot of training and advertisement and system change and stuff to change things like that. And at the end of the day, do they really care? No. There was a really really cool change in the UK this week where they've improved the meals for children at school, where they said they're not allowed to have like deep fried foods anymore, and there has to be more fruits and vegetables. Amazing, because obviously that's what we all want. But people were moaning about the meals to start off with, and at the end of the day, the kids were being fed. And at the end of the day, it's not down to the schools to do that. They have a budget,
Yeah.
and their job was to feed the children. It's from the top down, and now the government have made that change. It's brilliant as long as it fits in with the school's budget and that they can afford it and they get help to do so. So it's not easy to make change, that, and you can look at politics and all sorts of things for that. So it has to come from the top down. Whether they will ever do it or not, I don't know. Do they really care? I don't know.
That's a big question. Do they really care? Who knows? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that one, unfortunately. So, Joshua, where can people find out about the book You Can Eat That, and when is it out?
So it's out Thursday, 23rd of April. You can literally just find it by typing in "you can eat that" into Google or whatever. It's available to pre-order in UK and Ireland, so places like Eason's, Waterstones, Amazon. It's on Audible, it's on Kindle, so you can find it anywhere there or on my social media. I've got a link for them all.
Brilliant. So I'm going to
Um,
put that into the show notes for everyone so they can kind of click on that. So this will be out about 2 or 3 days before the book will be out. So people can kind of click on the link and it'll be in everything for that. So people will be able to order it and pre-order it. So I'd highly recommend to do that if you want proper information. I would highly recommend for people to do that.
yeah, awesome. So yeah, it's even got like a whole chapter on ultra processed food debate and how so much of it is linked to poverty and things. So it'll go into more depth with topics like that. But I just hope it helps people, like I said right at the start, just feel a bit calmer around food. And like all things can be enjoyed. It's kind of looking at the big picture and what we do the rest of the time. The Freddo chocolate that you eat every evening probably isn't changing your health much. It's actually all the other things we do. So that's kind of my wish is people read it and go, oh, feel a bit calmer. Let's focus on the big rocks rather than all these fancy little things. So yeah, that's my
Love
wish with it.
love that. Thank you so much for coming on, Josh. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.